What's up everyone, welcome to my channel. Have you ever come across something online that for some reason just makes you unreasonably angry? Annoyed might be a better word, but you get my point. Something that no matter how it is presented or what format, it's just irksome? Well, I have a few of those, but one that stands out above all else in the world of entertainment is the cinematic version of Batman's no-kill rule. More specifically, how much crap Zack Snyder gets for his handling of the infamous rule. In this video, I want to talk about how I think the vitriol against Snyder is misguided, while simultaneously telling you why I believe that the praise Christopher Nolan gets is likewise misguided. I hope to make my case in an entertaining way, and maybe even change a few minds, or at least challenge your previous mindset. If you frequent places like r DC Cinematics on Reddit, or different DC focus groups online, you will often see comment threads go on for hours with people complaining about how Zack doesn't get Batman or doesn't understand the source material. I spent more time than is healthy for my mental stability in these groups reading many of the comments as I could. The one thing that was apparent, but will not be discussed in this video, is people's desire to paint someone they disagree with as not understanding an issue. This happens a lot in political discussions online, which I will be avoiding with a 10-foot pole. What will be discussed, though, is the way in which each director approached the role, and why I think one of them was more honest. Before we get into the arguments, let's first do a rundown of where the rule came from, when it started, and why. Batman premiered in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. In that issue, he kills a man by kicking him into a vat of acid, and jokes that it was a fitting end. He took out his first supervillain in Detective Comics issue number 29 by killing Dr. Death. Batman throws some salt by saying, "Death to Dr. Death." He has gotten less bloodthirsty over the years, but thankfully more clever with his one-liners. Batman can also be seen shooting guns many times in these early appearances. In Batman's first solo, Batman number 1, he hangs Monster Man from the Batcopter. Let's take a closer look at that one. A minority, monster men are minorities, being lynched from a one-percenter's helicopter. Holy injustice, Batman. If something like that happened today, the internet would explode. Now we move on to Batman number 4, which was released in January 1941 and was known as the Winter issue. In this, Batman and Robin are fighting pirates. During this swashbuckling melee, Batman tells Robin to use the flat of your sword, Robin. Remember, we never kill with weapons of any kind. This is iconic and is pointed to by comic purists as proof that Batman's rule is organic. All of a sudden, Batman's days of shooting, stabbing, and lynching baddies was over. We know Bats has a perfectly good narrative justification for shying away from being an executioner, especially with guns. As I'm sure almost everyone knows at this point, Bruce Wayne's parents were gunned down in front of him in Crime Alley, a dangerous part of Gotham City. It would make sense then for gun violence and even killing to be abhorrent to Batman. Yet this wasn't the reason why they had to stop him killing criminals. In his book Batman and Me, one of the early collaborators of the comics, Bob Kane, said, quote, "The whole moral climate changed in the 1940-41 period. You couldn't kill or shoot villains anymore. DC prepared its own comics code which every artist and writer had to follow." End quote. They also gave Batman a teen sidekick to try and draw a younger audience. As the pulp-style book lost some popularity, heroes like Captain Marvel began to outsell Batman. Toss in the 1966 Batman show starring Adam West, and you have a perfectly fun and campy hero for kids of all ages. This new iteration of the Cape Crusader did not make everyone working for DC happy, even though Batman himself always seemed to be. The editor-in-chief of the comics, Julie Schwartz, became so tired of the campiness and puns that he decided to take the comics back to its darker roots. In 1973, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams reintroduced the Joker as a violent psychopath instead of just some zany trickster. While this did not lead to Batman killing anyone yet, it did open the door for the more violent Gotham, which led to a more vicious Dark Knight. The more savage Batman took hold in the 80s. We open up in 1982. Mike Barr and Trevor Von Eeden created a pretty intense story called The Messiah of the Crimson Sun. This was a sci-fi adventure, but it was not a campy space opera. The book closes with Batman killing Ra's al Ghul by forcing his spaceship into a laser beam, killing the leader of the League of Assassins before putting his ashes out the airlock into space. This was an early sign that sometimes Batman said enough is enough, and he took the ultimate step, therefore breaking his iconic no-kill rule. In a much more famous story, 1988's The Killing Joke, we get the ultimate portrayal of exactly this mindset by the Dark Knight. Spoilers ahead if you haven't read or seen this. I know it breaks the spoiler time frame, but it is available on HBO Max as a movie, which is a direct adaptation. In this book, the Joker paralyzes Barbara Gordon and kidnaps her father, Jim. He puts Batman through hell, and the story closes with Batman choking the Joker as the panel fills with laughter. It's left ambiguous as to how it ends exactly, but at one point the laughing stops, so it's fair to assume Bats finally kills the Joker. Although this story is outside DC canon, and as I said, it isn't direct in its portrayal of Batman hitting his breaking point, this will be a theme that I will touch on in greater detail coming up. Let's close out the history lesson by talking about the book that inspired Zack Snyder, the classic Batman comic, The Dark Knight Returns. This is another very dark story featuring an older Batman that has come out of retirement. At one point he breaks through a wall and shoots a guy with a machine gun to save a child. There is some evidence later in the comic that maybe the man didn't die, but he was shot with a .50 caliber mounted machine gun. There aren't many places you can shoot someone with that gun that wouldn't kill him or lead him to bleeding to death. That said, there are people arguing strongly saying Bat's conscience is still clean. I will link some articles in the description. But to me, this is another ambiguous probable kill. We leave part 2 behind with the understanding that Batman has killed. Even saying that, it is apparent that in his long life fighting crime in Gotham, Batman has tried to maintain the moral high ground by not purposely killing criminals. Now, how many guys died from injury or by being left behind by their cowardly partners? Who the hell knows? That is something for another time. Part 3. In defense of Zack Snyder. Batman has had some great adversaries over the years. Some say he has the best catalog of villains in comics history. One bad guy that I really liked was KG Beast. At the end of one particular issue, Batman has Beast locked in an underground bunker. As he is locking him in to eventually die of thirst one hits him eyes, he thinks to himself, quote, "Sometimes you have to break the rules. Sometimes the rules pervert justice," end quote. So when I came upon a quote in Forbes while researching this video, I had to get it in. I think it encapsulates how the rule has worked far better than I can. So let's start part 3 taking a look at it. It was written by Mark Hughes. Quote, So it is true that Batman has a no-killing rule in the comics, but it's also true that at times he lacked such a rule, or the rule was more fluid, or it was unclear where he drew the line, or he simply broke the rule, or defined certain forms of life as beyond application of his rule, meaning it's faithful to depict Batman as never killing, or as only killing on rare occasions, or as killing on and off depending on convenience, since there are comics for all of it. End quote. Here Mark is only referring to the comics. I want to start talking about the different interpretations of the rule in 2 movies now. One critically acclaimed, one not. One considered true to the no-kill rule, one not. And one where the movie thinks people are stupid, and one where it doesn't. Those movies would be Batman Begins and Batman vs. Superman. Let's start with the latter first. The theatrical cut of this movie is really very flawed. While it has some great themes, concepts, and scenes in my opinion, they don't tie together very well. There are some controversial choices made as far as casting goes. Everybody knows this, and I'm not reviewing that film. I just want to make plain that I'm not arguing for Batman vs. Superman as a movie. I do think the Ultimate Edition added so much and really filled in a lot of the plot holes, which elevated the movie in my mind. But that's me. One of the things that doesn't change in either cut is the fact that Batman is at the edge of his sanity. He is quick to extreme violence and also not adverse to killing. Almost always in self-defense, but still this is the most blatant Batman has been in terms of his willingness to take a life. If I was talking to some comic nerd from work or something, I can come up with excuses and even defenses as to why he was so quick to kill. But for the sake of time and the viewer's entertainment, I will not bother. Batman killed men in this movie, and he did it without much thought or remorse. How then can I say the criticism of Snyder is unfair, you ask? I'm going to come at this from a totally different angle. Yes, Batman killed in Snyder's movie, but I plan to show that he killed many people in Nolan's first Batman movie as well. The difference being Zack Snyder was honest throughout. He doesn't insult the audience by showing Batman saving the main antagonist on screen, while dozens of faceless men burn to death on and off screen, then say, "See, no killing." Zack Snyder respected us enough to say the world is screwed up, both ours and Batman's. This Batman is screwed up, and in that scenario he's gone far afield to take violence to its bitter end. There is something else funny that happens when looking at how people react to these movies. Because Zack didn't try to hide Batman's willingness to kill, people go out of their way to count everyone that fell to the Bat's hand in Batman vs Superman. Yet Nolan does cover up that fact with neat little tricks and an edge-of-your-seat, life-saving slide down a mountain that people go out of their way in the opposite direction. There are now many different videos and articles that track the kill counts from the Batman movies. In one list, they say that Bale's Batman killed over 12 total in all the movies. So they are counting everyone that blew up on screen, then just saying over. Yet when doing the count for Batfleck, they count every possible kill, even some that are borderline, and they go at 25. This happens in almost all kill count content. Even if you go with those numbers, Nolan and defenders of his still run into a problem, where Zack and his backers do not. Snyder's fans are not claiming that Batfleck followed the no-kill rule, yet you are. How many poor League members blew up? How about the so-called criminal in cuffs that Bruce refused to execute? These men all died because of direct actions caused by Nolan's Batman. For people that say, well, he was not Batman yet, so those don't count, I can only laugh. They go out of their way to show him risking his life to save Ra's, plus he just went on a tangent about how he will not kill. During the research for this video, I talked to some people from both sides of the argument. One gentleman who has read many, if not most, of the Batman's comics and is a firm believer in the rule. He also does not like the Snyderverse, nor did he think Batman's quick trigger was a good narrative choice. He said this when I asked him about the League HQ fire. Quote, as a Batman moment, it did bug me, I won't lie. I don't really want to play whataboutism, but the burning of the fort definitely felt like an afterthought that Nolan hadn't actually considered, especially since he had Bruce go on a monologue about how he's no executioner/killer 10 seconds before actually setting the place on fire, which seems like an incredibly odd choice if it was a deliberate character moment and not an accident. End quote. I appreciate the honesty from this fan. So many other fans, journalists, even critics ignore the fact that Bruce Wayne acted in a way that led to the horrific deaths of probably 24 people. The same people that a few minutes before were going to be on his team. He had trained to join the same group they were in. That is their only crime. The man that would go on to be the world's greatest detective had no inkling that this wasn't an altruistic group. He didn't ask what kind of missions do we go on, or how do we achieve our aims. Nolan doesn't think, nor does he care, that you will ask these questions. While Snyder may have been clumsy in his execution and a little too in your face with some of his themes, he at least respects the audience enough to be straight with them. While Nolan saved one man while others burned, and said, no killing, Snyder shot the shit out of a few bad guys and said, fuck it, it is what it is. Part 4, Conclusion. I have so much material of people going out of their way to defend Nolan's Batman, while at the same time tons of content full of people looking to obscure Snyder's portrayal of the Caped Crusader. As I write this, I don't know how long this will be, but I know if I get into all the bad takes from these movies, I'll be making the YouTube equivalent of a Snyder Cut, and no one wants a proverbial 4-hour YouTube video, at least not from me. I made this video because I've always felt that Zack got so much uncalled for criticism. It became cool at a certain point to shit talk about these movies. Once that happens, there is little chance it can recover. I call it the negativity hype train. It happens a lot with video games. I don't know the crossover between people listening to this and gamers, so I won't list examples, but believe me, it happens. Not saying that Snyder or other media doesn't deserve to be critiqued with a critical eye. I'm just saying that it often goes way too far. People know they will get clicks and likes and karma and upvotes from joining in on the bash party. On the other side of the coin, it happens with popular media, but the other way. Why haven't people made tons of videos about how bad Thor 2 is? I'm sorry, but that movie sucked. There was a world-ending event with, checks notes, dark elves, and not only does Thor not call the teammates, but there's no sign of any real-world authorities in London where the movie's ending takes place. That's just one small thing. The entire movie stinks outside of the jokes. Don't get me started on the jokes. Wow, I've just gone on a tangent. Forgive me. But these are the things I've noticed and thought about over the years when it came to the Snyderverse. It's cool to hate it. Although it got some of that back with the campaign and release of the Snyder Cut of Justice League, which was way better than whatever Whedon put out, still, it continues to be mocked. I wanted to at least put to bed one of its biggest critiques. While it still kills, I haven't tried to take that away. I hope people will think about how Batman's or Bruce Wayne's actions always results in the death of others. It's just how it's presented to the audience that seems to matter. Thank you for listening. Alright, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I did forget to say to please like and subscribe. I know everybody says that, and there's a reason why. It goes an incredibly long way for our videos to be noticed by people. I really worked hard on this video. I think it's pretty good. Hopefully you enjoyed it, whether or not you agreed or disagreed with my conclusions. And there's one final thing that I did want to say. For everybody that will go to the comment section and say, but in Batman Begins, people didn't die directly by Bruce's hand, whereas in Batman vs. Superman they did. I just want to say that Zack Snyder disagrees with you. He writes, and I pick up the quote in the middle, quote, "So I tried to do it by proxy, shoot the car they're in, the car blows up, or the grenade would go off in the guy's hand, or when he shoots the tank and the guy pretty much lights the tank himself. I perceive it as him not killing directly, but if the bad guys are associated with the thing that happens to blow up, he would say that's not really my problem." End quote. Okay, so I guess if you can use the excuse for Christopher Nolan, then Zack Snyder can use it as well. Alright, so that's about it right there, guys. I really appreciate it. Again, thank you for listening, and have a good one. Cheers.